Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar, Test English Skills Easily with ELST. My name is David Brieber and I'm a consultant here at Schulfried and I will guide you through this webinar today. In the next 15 minutes or so, I will give you an overview of the ELST test. So what it measures, why it is relevant, what options you have for test administrations, how it can be used in general. You're currently muted. If you have any questions in between, please use the GoToWebinar tool. There you can enter your questions, which I will gladly answer at the end of the webinar. So let us start. So English is clearly the #1 language in the world, with around 100 countries having English as their official language. It is the official language of most international organizations, and it is taught as the first foreign language in schools of many countries. In times of globalization, where the world is growing closer together, English is becoming more and more important. And not only in our free time when we watch YouTube videos or movies on streaming platforms, no, English is of course also highly relevant in education and profession. Here are just a few examples. English is the language of science, so during your studies, English skills are very important for reading scientific literature or exchanging ideas with students from other countries. If you go abroad for your studies, you need English anyways. In a professional context, English language skills have an influence on economic competitiveness. In large international companies, English is often the only language spoken. People work in international teams and customers come from different countries. So English is often the only possibility for a common international, internal and external communication. So English skills are therefore an important basic competence for both education and profession. So proof of English language skills is therefore becoming increasingly relevant. The question is, how can English skills be reliably tested? Basically, there are many different possibilities, of course, but in general, I think one can distinguish two ways of doing this. On the one hand, I myself as an individual can make sure that I can prove my English skills. There are various internationally accepted language tests for this purpose. The advantage of these language tests is that they check language skills very comprehensively. The disadvantage is that it is very, very time consuming and costly for the individual. Another way is that the company or an institution tests the English language skills itself. So such tests are usually less comprehensive. However, the effort and the costs are often much less for the individual. And the effort for the institution and the quality of the tests depend on the method that is used. If this is done, for example, on the basis of an interview, for example, the time and the financial effort is relatively high and the objectivity is also lower than compared to standardized tests. Today, I want to show you one of such standardized tests, which is the focus of attention today, which is ELST. ELST stands for English Language Skills Test. As you will see, ELST is an objective, fast, uncomplicated, and flexible method to measure English skills. The test was actually developed almost 10 years ago using strictly scientific criteria and has now been updated and expanded. It is a multiple choice performance test with 3 subtests and a time limit per item. The 3 subtests enable a standardized and therefore objective assessment of 3 basic components of the English language, which are reading comprehension, vocabulary, and grammar. How are these competencies measured? Let's have a look at these tasks together and maybe imagine a sales representative and think about why these language skills could be relevant for him. So in the grammar subtest, sentences are presented in which one part is missing, and the test person has to choose which of the answer alternatives is grammatically correct. The difficulty of these tasks varies according to the frequency of use of certain grammatical structures. This is relevant for our imaginary sales representative, for example, when he writes emails to his customers, which of course should be grammatically correct. The subtest vocabulary, in here sentences are presented in which a word is marked. The test person must determine which answer options have similar or opposite meanings, depending on the task. And of course, the rarer the words, the more difficult the task. Thus, when the salesperson is communicating with other customers or colleagues, he should have a sufficiently large vocabulary to understand the meaning of what he's talking about and what other words are. And a large vocabulary will also enable him to have more variability, but also specificity in his English language. The subtest reading comprehension. In this test, there are two phases. On the one phase, you always see a text and you have to read this text in a limited amount of time. And afterwards, you get specific questions to this, referring to this text. The difficulty of the text is influenced by various characteristics, such as sentence length, degree of abstraction, or the frequency of word usage in the text. Here it is also clear why such competence is relevant. Our sales representative must not only be able to read emails, but possibly also to read complex English contracts. So these basic components of the English language, which I just presented, can be measured with three different test forms. Or they differ in terms of the test content, the type of test administration, and also the test duration. There is a standard form, an adaptive standard form, and this is new, a screening form. As the name already suggests, the screening form is much shorter than the two other standard forms. This is partly because the subtest reading comprehension is not included, but also because the subtests contain fewer items than in the standard forms. The difference between the standard form and the adaptive standard form is the type of item administration. So in the standard form, we have a linear item administration, which means that the same items are always presented for each test person in a defined ascending order and ascending difficulty, regardless of how the test person responds to each item. In the adaptive test form, what we see here is that the difficulty is adapted to the test person's performance level. So depending on whether the test person answers correctly or incorrectly, easier or more difficult items are presented. And this adaptive procedure allows an even more precise assessment of the person's performance level. The third aspect of how the test forms differ is the practical ways in which the tests can be administered. With the updated ELST, it is now possible to assess English language skills through online tests. So this gives you full flexibility when it comes to test administration. The online administration allows you to be independent of location. You can perform supervised or unsupervised testing, and else can of course also be combined with other tests in the Vienna test system. An unsupervised online test is called open mode testing, whereas a supervised online test is called a proctored mode testing. In this case, the test person is supervised via an video conference tool and via the webcam during the person is working on the test. This prevents the person from cheating, and it also doesn't allow the person to get help from other people, and of course also ensures the test security. This flexibility in test administration allows the use of ELST in different contexts of application. Let's briefly look at two possible scenarios. On the one hand, we have here a scenario for a study aptitude test. We currently actually have several customers who, due to the current corona pandemic, have to deal with the topic of proctored testing in the context of study aptitude tests. So what's new is that ELST can now also be used in this context. This means that in this context, you have a pool of students, and you can send them a link for a test battery, for example, here in combination with the INSPAT to measure cognitive abilities. Actually, the INSPAT was also updated and is also now able to do online testing with INSPAT 2. So we could combine this with here in this case with the adaptive form of ELST, and they can do the study aptitude tests at home in the proctored mode. So all test persons, they open the link as soon as the video conference starts, and then the person is supervised while they're working on the tests. Afterwards, immediately the test results are saved and applicants can be ranked with the ranking tool in the Vienna test system. This not only saves time and money, but also avoids the next corona cluster. The second example would be an example, a scenario in which applicants are tested in for the recruitment, in the recruitment process of an international company. So of course, ELST can also be integrated in multi-stage selection processes. For example, here where we have combining the screening form of ELST with other screenings such as INT to make an initial pre-selection and then to invite only a small pool of applicants to an on-site testing with a more comprehensive test battery. This, of course, also saves time and costs, but ultimately also improves your selection process. When it comes to the test results, so what comes after the test, it is an easy to interpret test result. On the one hand, you have the comparison with a representative and now also updated norm sample. On the other hand, there is also the possibility that the test performances in each language component are assigned to language competence level according to the common European framework of reference. So hopefully I could convince you that ELST is a valuable tool to test English skills. I tried to show you, and I think you know, that English skills are very important basic competence for both for education and profession. They can be measured in different ways, and ELST is one of them, actually an objective, fast, uncomplicated, and flexible way of doing this. And I also tried to show you that you now, with the updated ELST, you really have full flexibility in test administration. You can use them, you can use ELST in different application contexts, whether if it's online, offline, supervised, unsupervised, or as a single test or in combination with other tests. The results can be interpreted with respect to common language skills levels.